My name is Shelley Hughes, and I am the Director of Children's Services and Family Engagement for the Chicago Public Library System. And I'd like to welcome you all to Best of the Best. Today's book talks are going to be for our older audience, our older readers. Yesterday's were for our younger readers. If you didn't tune in yesterday to listen to the amazing book talks that were presented yesterday, please do look for the recording. We will be sharing that after Best of the Best. They were so good. I had to have my camera off for most of the time because approximately 50% of the book talks made me both want to read the book and cry. So you should definitely catch up with yesterday's if you didn't see them live. But basically, the only reason that I'm here is to say thank you, largely to all of the evaluators and our presenters for today who've worked so hard over the last year reading hundreds of books to determine which ones were the best of the best, and then preparing this presentation for today. A huge thank you to Josh Farnham from the Children's Services and Family Engagement team who put together all of the logistics for the last 2 days of presentations, and an enormous thank you to Liv Hansen, who is our content specialist here at Chicago Public Library. If there's a book on our shelves for kids between the ages of 0 and 14, Liv had something to do with it somewhere along the way. She's a font of knowledge and just does an excellent job in keeping us supplied with amazing and diverse books to build our collections here in our library. And we're very lucky to have her. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Liv.
Thank you so much, Shelley. Before we get started, again, I just wanted to acknowledge all of the evaluators whose hard work and expertise shaped the lists we're sharing today. So a big round of virtual applause to you and to Children's Services and Family Engagement for making today's presentations possible. Thank you also to everyone who nominated a title for consideration this year and to all of you for joining us today. As many of you know, creating our Kids Best of the Best lists is a year-long process. Any book purchased by CPL published from December 1st of the previous calendar year through the current calendar year is eligible for consideration. We prioritize reading books with local connections, be it setting, author, or local press, and books that are recommended by you. In 2021, our dedicated team of evaluators read and reviewed 450 books to create these lists. So what made the books we're discussing today stand out? A Chicago Public Library Best of the Best book, 1, reflects living in an urban multicultural society. 2, addresses a significant curriculum or collection need. 3, meets high standards of writing and illustration. 4, provides an innovative approach to topics for a youth audience, and 5, adds excitement to programs and special projects. So we do our best to reflect Chicago and Chicagoans. Let the book talks begin.
And we'll kick it off by presenting the list for fiction for older readers. And starting us off is Alenka.
Hey, that's me. Can you hear me? Okay, perfect. I didn't want to do the whole thing and then no one can hear me. So identity is always a key theme in tween and middle grade literature, but in the 5 books that I have for you today, it's the protagonist's relationships with others that press them to discover new facets of their identity. So my first book is The Legend of Auntie Po. May is very familiar with the special magic of shared meals. She sees it every day at the California logging camp where her father works as a cook. May also provides support and solace through her stories about the literal larger-than-life Auntie Po, a heroic Paul Bunyan-esque Chinese logger. When a tragic loss and racial prejudice disrupt life at the camp and drive May and her father away from the life she's always known, she'll need the power of stories and of food to make it through their struggles. Thank you. So this gorgeous watercolor comic takes place in 1885, 3 years after the passing of the Chinese Exclusion Act. Core's watercolors give the comic a warmth, vibrancy, and emotion that matches May's personality, while also highlighting the beauty and specificity of the era and the landscape. Cool, sparkling blue skies, warm yellow fires, and chartreuse bits of growth dot much of the land, even as the presence of brown trees decreases. May very much defines herself in relation to the hard work and emotional support she can provide to others, and Auntie Po's gigantic size emphasizes the power and impact of her stories. However, racism and upheaval push May to confront feelings of helplessness and powerlessness, and no one can come out of such an experience unchanged. Okay. All right, my next book is Too Bright to See. So Bug lives in the modern era. Oops, we go back one. We ended up on Ophie's ghosts. Cool. So Bug lives in the modern era, but in a haunted house. The ghosts of the house do strange things that feel scary, and the slow-paced atmospheric language of the book is typical of a horror novel, but this isn't typical horror. The main ghost in the story is a familiar one, Bug's beloved Uncle Roderick, who passed away recently. Bug immediately recognizes Roderick's familiar presence, but is baffled by the specific message he is striving to convey. Is he trying to share something about himself that he couldn't share while still alive, or is his message actually about Bug? Lukoff draws fascinating connections between the uncanny, uncomfortable feelings that some experience while coming to understand their trans and or queer identities, and the strange sensation of sensing ghosts. The end result is a creepy but intensely compelling story about identity and the loved ones who help us find our true selves. Okay, Ophie's ghosts. So Ophelia Harrison, or Ophie, doesn't just sense ghosts, she can see them. Ophie's Ghosts takes place in 1920s Georgia and follows 12-year-old Ophie as she and her mother begin working for the white family that lives in haunted Daffodil Manor. Ophie befriends a charming but sinister ghost who was murdered in the house, and as she pursues the truth behind what happened to her new friend, she finds ways to use her own voice and strength amidst the racism that tries to dictate her life. Okay. All right, Forever This Summer. So 11-year-old Georgie thought being stuck in Bogalusa, Louisiana for the summer was going to be boring until she befriended 12-and-a-half-year-old Marky. Despite their closeness in age, the pair has had vastly different experiences. Marky's disability and history with foster care cause her to question whether more privileged, able-bodied Georgie will really listen to her and understand her. However, they built a unique but complex friendship that allows them to support each other as they navigate fraught family dynamics. Okay, and Black Boy Joy. So curated by Kwame Mbalia, this anthology collects 17 stories about young Black boys and non-binary kids, catching each character during a joyful moment, or as they endeavor to find joy after a difficult time. Many of the stories focus on tweens figuring out relationships, navigating first crushes, discovering new and exciting things about grandparents, learning to see parents in a new light, or asking parents to see them in a new light. Throughout each character's journey, joy, the pursuit of it, the absence of it, but the eventual return of it, and the brilliant warmth of it is front and center. And that's it for me. I will hand you off to Janet.
So the first book I'm doing is The Last Cuentista by Dana Barba Higuera. Había una vez, in the year 2061, Halley's Comet is about to collide with Earth. 3 spaceships, along with technology and experts who can ensure their survival of humans on a new planet 360 light years away, must go. Peita Peña's family is selected because her parents are gifted scientists. It is Lita, Peita's grandmother, who knows her 12-year-old granddaughter is a storyteller, not a scientist. Could Cuentas help Peita survive when she wakes almost 400 years later to discover zealots took over while she was in hypersleep? The ship and the plans she knew are completely changed. Somehow, Peita must lead the last children of Earth to the new planet. This is an amazing mix of dystopian science fiction, adventure, and Mexican folklore. It is the winner of the American Library Association's 2022 Newbery Award, as well as Chicago Public Library's own Mock Newbery. Boy Everywhere by A.M. Dasu. Sammy is a regular 13-year-old boy whose concerns are school, friends, and soccer tryouts, until there is a bombing at a local mall where his sister and mother are shopping for him. Sammy's privileged life in Damascus isn't the same. Suddenly, his family must flee to stay safe. Their journey is a desperate challenge to survive. They make it to Manchester, but resentful relatives and the hardship of being refugees create a hopelessness that has Sammy wanting to return home regardless of the risk. After all, it's his fault that his little sister is traumatized and his parents are thrown out of their relative's house. Maybe if he leaves, everything will be better. The Lion of Mars by Jennifer Holm. In 2091, 11-year-old Belle lives in the American settlement on the planet Mars, along with 4 teens and 6 adults. Like all the youth, he arrived as a baby. They spend their days sharing chores like making toilet paper from algae, learning about Earth through digireels, and one time stealing a Mars rover to go for a joyride. While they know there are other settlements with residents from other countries, there is a strict no contact rule among the Mars pods until a virus breaks out that sickens the adults. The kids are handy with duct tape, but they can't manage everything on their own. Belle and one other set out to get help through an underground railway that eventually leads them to the French settlement. There, they discover other kids. While the adults plan to stick to their directives, it's the young people who see things differently and know they need each other. Now we'll hear from Sarah Holtkamp.
Thanks, Janet. First up is Amari and the Night Brothers by B.B. Alston. Imagine this, your amazing older brother has gone missing. And even worse, it feels like not only does no one care, but the police have chalked this up to just another instance of a kid from the projects getting into something illegal. This is exactly what happened to 13-year-old Amari Peters' family. Quentin was Amari's best friend and favorite person in the whole world, and she is convinced that her brother is alive, no matter what anyone says. Then, one day, she discovers a magic briefcase left by her brother in her closet, and her life takes a huge turn. She finds herself trying out for the Bureau of Supernatural Affairs' magical summer program. Suddenly, she is in the middle of a secret world, competing with other kids for a spot in this prestigious summer camp. While she is looking for answers about her brother, she's also constantly proving herself to her new peers and instructors. Amari is one of those great characters you just can't get enough of. She's smart, fierce, and determined. Even when it feels like the world is against her, she never gives up looking for answers and fighting for what she knows is right. Rich with wonderful secondary characters, including a roommate and new friend who's a half-dragon, this book is a perfect middle grade fantasy with little bits of Men in Black sprinkled in. I'd give it to fans of Percy Jackson or even that famous boy wizard. Amari and the Night Brothers was one of my favorite books to share with patrons since its release. It's the first in the series, and I can't wait to see what happens next. 2021 was quite a year for middle grade fantasies, and there's two others on our list I'd love to mention. Next slide. Yep, great. Cece Rios in the Desert of Souls is a wonderful ride of magic and mythology set in the small town of Tierra del Sol. When Cece's older sister is kidnapped by a dark and powerful creature, she knows that she is the only one that can save her. Similar to Amari, Cece is the type of character you can't stop reading. This is a beautifully written novel, and you will find yourself lost in the world of Mexican folklore. Next slide, great. City of the Plague God is part of the Rick Riordan Presents series and is based on Mesopotamian mythology. 13-year-old Six's life is turned upside down when the ancient god of disease turns up, demanding that he give him the secret to eternal life. This engaging book is basically the story of a pandemic, and it's wild to read while living through one. It's action-packed and takes lots of twists and turns. Most importantly, it's a great addition to the world of middle grade fantasies. Next up is Josh, who I think has some great realistic fiction to share.
Okay. Well, imagine you live in the Midwest, which should be easy for most of you, I think. And suddenly you get the opportunity to move to Hawaii, right? Sounds like pretty good on a day where the high is like 7 degrees or something. But now I want you to imagine the opposite, which is what happens to Ahmed. Because of his dad's health, the family has to move from Hawaii back to Minnesota. And just in time for a new 6th grade year where Ahmed gets to be the new kid in a new class where he may or may not have done the summer reading he was assigned to do. Again, he didn't. But check out the books the class is studying this year. We're talking Holes, Terabithia. We're talking Mixed Up Files. Good stuff. Ahmed goes into the experience with his usual MO, do as little work as possible. But somehow everything goes off track from the jump. Not only does he end up with a leadership position in his working group, once he actually starts reading the books, he's kind of into them. Now, significantly, on top of his academic work and his dad's medical treatments, Ahmed, whose family's heritage is from India, is also now in a school with no other brown faces like his. But he does find an emotional connection to another student from the past. Ahmed's uncle, who died many years ago, went to this same school. And it's through his uncle's life that Ahmed gets some inspiration and insight into both his school and his family. Now, there's a whole lot woven into this story of one kid's school year. It touches on some bullying, Islamophobia, culture shock, anxiety, and family dynamics and chronic health issues. But you've got to believe me, please. It's predominantly a hopeful and really funny and upbeat book, and especially through Ahmed's very wry narration the whole time, there's a lot of laughs. So some more awesome realistic fiction we got on the list this year is The Chance to Fly. And I just wanted to call out actually just these two in a row. Got two great books with characters that use wheelchairs. Ahmed ends up working closely with a classmate who uses a wheelchair. And of course, Nat, the main character in this one, does too. Nat has big Broadway musical aspirations. So definitely this needs to go in the hands of all those theater nerds. And since the author, Ali Stroker, actually uses a wheelchair herself and has won a Tony Award, she's definitely bringing the authenticity there. Merci Suárez Can't Dance by Meg Bettina. Mercy's is another super funny voice, despite some real complex issues she's grappling with. Love, frenemies, her grandpa's Alzheimer's. This is the second Merci Suárez book, but can actually easily stand alone if you haven't read the first yet. And we got Ancestor Approved, our other featured short story collection. It was an amazing mix of funny and moving. It revolves around an intertribal powwow, and it's a wonderful window / mirror for indigenous American cultures. Plus, it's like mind-blowing the intricate ways in which the stories, they actually interweave and connect to each other. And the editor, Cynthia Leidick Smith, actually has a novel of her own on the list this year. Take it away, Kristen.
Hello. All right. Sisters of the Neversea by Cynthia Leidick Smith is a refreshed retelling of the original story you may know as Peter Pan. It's about three siblings from a blended family experiencing growing pains when their lives are disrupted by none other than Peter Pan and the fairy Tinkerbell. They persuade Wendy and Michael to leave home late one night while Lily, distrustful of the pair in their story of Neverland, follows behind them in pursuit. The kids soon learn of Peter's dastardly plan to trap them on the island of Neverland, as he has done with many other kids, to live out his misguided fantasies of the Lost Boys, pirates, and a bad word for indigenous people used by Peter, until an uncertain end when they become too old or question him too much. Lily joins forces with a group of indigenous children she finds stuck on the island and sets out to rescue her brother and sister. This book is a powerful tale of family, chosen, and birth, which brings past to the forefront and gives old characters a chance at reconciliation. Next slide, please. Lily's anxiety and protective nature remind me of Hazel in Hazel Bly in the Deep Blue Sea. Hazel has PTSD from a kayaking accident in which she lost one of her moms. Now she has panic attacks and never gets far from her mother or little sister. Her anxiety is present when her mom decides they need to start a new life in a small sea town in Maine, and Hazel must learn to move forward with many changes like going to Ocean Club at the library with her new friends, mom dating someone new, and growing up without her mom. Hazel soon learns of her new friend Lemon's obsession with a local legend of a mermaid, Rosemary Lee, or the Rose Maid, a young girl who once lived in Rose Harbor that turns out to be linked to a loss of Lemon's own. Hazel must grow and process her grief while learning how to let new people into her world. I recommend this book for young romantics, mermaid enthusiasts, and those seeking LGBTQ family representation. 2022 Prince Honor Book Starfish is a book of free verse poetry that tells the story of Ellie, a young girl who is constantly picked on and told that she is too fat. Ellie keeps a journal of fat girl rules to try and cope with the world intent on tearing her down. But with the help of therapy, a wonderful new friend next door, and her own personal strength and growth through countless challenges that would easily break anyone at any age, Ellie vows to be the starfish, to spread out unapologetically and take up as much room as she possibly can. This wonderful exploration is the impact of bullying, resilience, and a pure heart. And now here's Tara to present 3 more great Best of the Best book titles.
Being Clem by Lisa Klein Ransom. Clemson Thurber Jr. is one of the smallest kids in his 4th grade class, but he has big expectations to follow in his father's footsteps as a brave Navy man. After Clem's father dies in the Port Chicago disaster in San Francisco during World War II, things start to fall apart. While his mother works long hours as a maid, despite having a college education, Clem is faced with trying to find his worth in his family. He's deathly afraid of water. His problems with bullies are solved by befriending an even bigger bully named Lyman from the book Leaving Lyman. But when Lyman starts bullying a new student named Langston from the book Finding Langston, Clem becomes more assertive and forms a friendship with Langston. This friendship leads him to attend a high school swim meet where he meets someone that helps him overcome his fear of water and realize how brave and independent he can be. Being Clem is the 3rd book in the Finding Langston trilogy and offers a close-up look at Chicago's African-American community in the 1940s. Root Magic. Jezebel and her brother Jay miss their grandmother after she dies. She was a root worker who people went to for magical protection and healing. In her absence, their Uncle Doc tells their mother that he will train them in root magic so they can learn to cherish the history and traditions of their African-American folk magic and heal from the trauma and prejudice that the family has faced as root workers. Royce offers insights into a tumultuous time during the civil rights movement and also reflects on her family background in root work. Artie and the Wolf Moon. Artie accidentally discovers that she comes from a family of werewolves one night when she sneaks out to take photos and runs into a wolf. After the wolf transforms into her mother, she explains to Artie that they will need to talk about their family history and powers. When Artie's powers develop, she starts training with the Black werewolf community and learns more about her family and her late father. But something even scarier than werewolves is threatening to destroy their family and their community. This debut graphic novel offers boldly outlined art with distinct and expressive Black characters to combine Black girl magic and werewolf tales for a magical family drama you can really sink your teeth into. Up next is Shiloh.
Brandon should have been in school that morning. He should have been hanging out with his friends. Instead, he was on an elevator, heading down to the underground mall to replace the Wolverine claws he'd broken. That was when the first plane hit. The date is September 11th, 2001. And Brandon is in an elevator in the North Tower of the World Trade Center, or Ground Zero. Now Brandon must survive the unimaginable while attempting to save his father, who is trapped on the 107th floor. Fast forward to 2019, where Rashmina lives in a small village in Afghanistan. When she decides to help a wounded American soldier, her village becomes ground zero for the war between the Taliban and the United States. Brandon and Rashmina's stories are intertwined in a fast-paced novel about survival in the worst possible situations. But it is also about finding the strength to come together as a community to help our fellow man. Grat's extensive back matter about the history leading up to 9/11 attacks and the aftermath is also included. Many of the same themes can be found in Sadia Zaki's Yes, Yusuf Azeem is Not a Hero, which is set in a small town in Texas on the eve of the 20th anniversary of 9/11. Yusuf can't wait to start 6th grade. He was excited about getting his own email address, being old enough for a locker, and finally being able to join the robotics team. So what that he's found a note in his locker the first day of school that says, "You suck," or another the next morning that said, go home. This was still going to be a great school year. But when the never forget signs start appearing around town and a Proud Boys-esque group starts harassing the Muslim families, Yusuf must make a choice. Remain silent or stand up for what is right and be a hero. This is a great book to start a discussion not only about how 9/11 changed the world, but how current events are mirroring history. Born Behind Bars by Padme Venkatraman, 9-year-old Kabir, jailed with his mother since birth, is forced to leave the only home and family he knows. When he ends up on the streets of Chennai, India, after narrowly escaping being sold into slavery, he befriends a Roma girl, and together they try to find his father's family and free his innocent mother. And with our last fiction books of the day, here's Tamala.
Thank you, Shiloh. Fifth grade can be a tough year. It is a milestone year where double digits can mean double work scholastically and socially. Transition is synonymous with change, and some changes, big or small, can be hard. While most people ease into transitions, it seems as if Maya has been dropped into a transition tornado, and this school year has all the makings of a disaster. First, she is put in a separate class from her best friends Jada and Imjin. Next, Maya is assigned to the mean teacher's classroom. And the final ingredient for this recipe for a disastrous school year, she now has to figure out how to make new friends and fend off a bully. So what's a fifth grade science enthusiast to do? Activate those problem-solving skills and program a personal support robot, of course. Maya and the Robot is a heartwarming tale about community and using the magic that makes you, to persevere. Her love of all things science is an open love letter to STEM and is sure to excite the inner scientist in us all. Readers will get caught up in the curiosity, intelligence, and wonder of Maya as she tinkers and problem solves to bring Ralph the Robot to life. They will cheer as Ralph, Maya, and the broader community bond, helping Maya give voice to her power along the way. Educators will love the scientific explanations and meta social-emotional learning component, while Chicago natives will enjoy the reference to the Southside institutions and positive portrayal of community as embodied in the adaptability of Ralph's artificial intelligence. Give this title to any reader interested in STEM and computer programming, shy kids, kids who have a hard time with transitions, and those who need encouragement to find the power within their gifts to use their voice. And while we're on the topic of voice, meet fifth grade Simon, AKA the notorious DOG, who has rhymes galore in his head, you see. He may be small in stature, but his aim is to capture everyone's attention, except he failed to mention that the thought of presentations causes mad frustration. Will he ever speak aloud, his words to move a crowd, or stay stressing? I know the answer, but we'll keep you guessing. This debut middle grade novel from the rapping teacher Dwayne Reed is a humorous middle grade tale of using one's voice to bring visibility to the overlooked and misunderstood, and how we can use our voice and gifts to be change agents. It handles heavy topics that are both individual and societal in a light yet thought-provoking and respectful manner. Simon has an active inner world in which his alter ego, the notorious DOG, is a prolific rapper. Only a few, his family, his best friends, and a neighborhood elder named Sonny are aware of this. Sonny, an unhoused person aptly named for his genial and humorous disposition, also possesses a vocal gift that few are aware of. When Simon is given an assignment to do a presentation on a timely topic affecting his community, Simon chooses homelessness. What began as a somewhat nervous impulse answer turns out to be one of the best ways Simon, a normally reticent kid, uses his voice. Shy readers will empathize with Simon's internal unrest and anxiety over public speaking, and all readers will root for him to kick a rhyme out loud. Educators will find joy in using this book as an example of real-world applications for linking learning to action. Next slide, please. Separation from parents is tough for all kids, but for middle schoolers experiencing the rapid emotional and physical changes associated with coming of age, the absence of a parent can have a deeply profound impact. The middle schoolers in the following books, each separated at pivotal moments in their development, have an inner strength and resilience that is inspiring for all ages. 13-year-old Eli and their 17-year-old sister, Anna, are used to taking care of their mother, an alcoholic known in their small town for overindulgence and brushes with the law. When their mother's alcohol-related law infractions land her in a rehab facility, Eli and Anna tap into their survival skills to avoid the foster care system at all costs. Middle grade readers will marvel at the early ingenuity of Anna and Eli's plan to keep their mother's absence a secret by having Anna pose as their custodial aunt, as the custodial adult, LGBTQIA and ally readers will applaud Eli's unapologetic self-acceptance while empathizing with her internal battle over confessing her feelings to her crush and best friend, Mina. Middletown tackles serious topics such as alcoholism, bullying, and grooming respectfully and bravely. This title is an excellent book club discussion choice for middle grade and high school students, especially fans of Moon's issues-driven novel, Sparrow. 10-year-old Gabrielle is nervously excited about her move from Haiti to Brooklyn, New York. She is eager about the things America offers: free school, streets littered with gold, and enough money for all, or so she thinks. However, Gabrielle is concerned about her parents not being able to join her, as promised not to get sent home as a Timon Pabon, a no-good kid who squanders the opportunity to experience the promise of America. She soon learns that not everything that glitters is gold, as she finds her transition to the US a literal and figuratively cold experience, and struggles to adjust to the weather, language, and culture, all while dealing with bullying. It's enough to rattle anyone. However, a promise made is a promise kept, even if it means paying a steep price for the help of a witch. This title addresses immigration and acculturation in an engaging and sometimes humorous way. In addition, Haitian culture is highlighted in a manner that provides readers a glimpse into the tensions that may arise when juxtaposed against American culture in the States. Give this title to readers interested in fantasy, stories about identity, and as a way to build empathy and appreciation for other cultures. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to get our presentation for informational books for older readers up. I'm so excited we get to share this with you today. We've got 20 fantastic books coming your way. All right. And Katie is going to kick us off.
No Way They Were Gay. Next slide. Hidden Lives and Secret Loves by Lee Wind. The word history sounds really official, like it's all fact, like it's exactly what happened. But that's not necessarily true. History was crafted by the people who recorded it. For example, imagine you get in a fist fight at school and afterward there will be different versions of what happened. You'll have your story, the other kid will have his story, and a third person who maybe saw the fight happen will have her story. Which version becomes the official story, the story of that moment? History is complicated. In No Way They Were Gay, Lee Wind examines source letters, poems, and more to rethink the lives and loves of historical figures. History has often ignored men who loved men, women who loved women, and people who lived outside gender boundaries. For example, did you know that if you read Abraham Lincoln's private letters, you'll find out that he was in love with a man? It's true. There are lots of reasons these stories may not be well known. Sometimes people try to destroy them, like Nazis who burned books featuring LGBTQ stories. Sometimes people felt felt they had to hide the truth about who they loved, such as the actor Cary Grant. Sometimes other people hid these stories, such as when Michelangelo wrote poems to his male lover, and they were published with the pronouns changed to make it look like they were written to a woman. And sometimes we could only tell our stories in secret code, shown in the diaries of Anne Lister, discovered 150 years after her death. But sometimes the true stories are told, and this book is one of those times. I especially appreciate the introductory chapters, including the author explaining how and why he chose to feature the people in this book, what LGBTQ means, what the loaded phrase being in the closet means, and more. Primary sources are indicated in bold text. Next slide. And the book includes lengthy source notes, a biography, and an index. This is a great book to discuss LGBT pride and issues of social justice, but it's also a great book to explore information literacy. Using primary sources to interrogate history instead of blindly believing it may change your perspective. And that's No Way They Were Gay by Lee Wind. I forgot I had the next one too. A completely different title, but not quite. Other Boys by Damian Alexander. In Other Boys, his debut graphic novel memoir, Damian Alexander shares how growing up, he wasn't like other boys. In flashbacks, we learn all the ways he was different. Most kids at his school are pretty rich, but Damian and his family live in poverty, which makes him feel different. Damian's mother died when he was a baby, and he and his brother are raised by their grandparents, who are very loving. Still, Damian knows it's not the same thing as having a mother, and it makes him feel different from other boys. Damian even plays different than other boys. He would rather play with Barbies, but even when he plays with G.I. Joes, he still plays differently than other boys. Being different means Damian is bullied, so when he starts 7th grade at a new school, he has a foolproof plan to avoid more bullying. He's got to stop talking. Starting on the first day of 7th grade, he won't utter a word. If he keeps his mouth shut, the bullies will have nothing to tease him about, right? Wrong. Damian's classmates can tell there's something different about him. Kids have teased him his whole life, especially other boys. But if boys can be so cruel, why does Damian have a crush on one? For fans of other middle school graphic novel memoirs, and for those who feel like there's nowhere they fit in, Other Boys is a sweet, sad, and sometimes scary story of the journey towards accepting yourself. That's Other Boys by Damian Alexander.
Ally. We'll talk about showing up, screwing up, and trying again. Edited by Shakira Bourne and Dana Allison Levy. Being a multiracial person, I'm Armenian from my father's side and Filipino and white from my mother's side, as well as being a person with a disability. I related to this book on so many levels. I'm going to be reading from the inside flap because I can't state it any better than what they did with this book message. As an ally, you use your power, no matter how big or small, to support others. You learn and try and mess up and try harder. In this collection of true stories, 17 critically acclaimed and best-selling young adult authors get real about being an ally, needing an ally, and showing up for friends and strangers. From raw stories of racism and invisible disability to powerful moments of passing the mic, these authors share their truth. They invite you to think about your own experiences and choices and how you can be a better ally. Self-reflection prompts, resources, journaling ideas, and further reading suggestions help you find out what you can do, because we're all in this together and we all need allies.
Until we learn to talk about race, the poison of racism won't go away. To help readers begin talking about race, the authors of Stamped for Kids, Racism, Anti-Racism, and You introduce important terms: segregationists, assimilationist, and anti-racist. These are important words and concepts. These are words that will be used throughout this book and ones that should be used in readers' lives to think about how people are acting. And it's okay if people act a different way in different situations because people can change. This book is not your usual history book. Stories matter, and the words we use to tell them matter. This book attempts to tell the story of slavery and racist ideas that led to America as we know it today. The authors use thoughtful words, words that include everyone and that help us to see people's motives, even when their motives are ugly and racist. This is the second adaptation of the popular adult book, stamped from the beginning, The Definitive History of Racist Ideas in America by Ibram X. Kendi. And while that sounds like it could be a cash grab, I promise that it isn't. Sonia Cherry Paul, who did this adaptation, also created the Educator's Guide that encourages teachers to use affirmation and awareness to teach the topic of racism and history. Plus, it includes resources to help avoid further racial trauma. It asks anyone teaching this to do their own work before diving in with kids. I love it because you can use this guide to help you with many different books, including a few we'll be talking about today.
Try this again. Family history projects are often assigned to help kids connect the distant past to their current reality. With the help of their parents, many kids can trace their lineage back to their home country, pinpointing their arrival in the United States. However, for many African American kids, the tracing of one's lineage is nearly impossible, complicated by the erasure of people not considered people but property for 400 years. The 1619 project, Born on the Water, provides young readers with some context for their arrival in the United States by linking the grandchild of the narrator's tale with the people and area from which the enslaved were kidnapped. An adaptation of the critically acclaimed adult title by Nicole Hannah-Jones, this picture book is written with award-winning author Renee Watson and gorgeously illustrated by artivist Nicholas Smith. Born on the Water begins with a child's family tree assignment and chronicles life before enslavement through the struggle for equity. Jones and Watson remind us that the kidnapped and enslaved were mathematicians, agricultural scientists, architects, and doctors from whom talents were mined and used in the creation of this country. They were people who, against insurmountable odds, planted dreams and hope and willed themselves to keep living. In this bluntly honest remix of the dated narratives and history that I learned about Africans in America, Born on the Water humanizes those once considered property, the African chefs, alchemists, musicians who all had a knowing. The sharp-minded learners who taught their tongues to speak Portuguese and read strange characters are the survivors who provided a blueprint for resilience that should serve as an inspiration to us all. This title is an excellent option for beginning conversations about the trauma of slavery with young children and challenging histories that begin with the port of the first ship in Virginia. References to an African kingdom, language, and traditions provide the spark needed for young readers to investigate the rich histories of the kidnapped and for educators to help build the connection between the past and the promise of our futures.
Unspeakable, the Tulsa Race Massacre, covers an event that has been unfortunately unspoken. But it wasn't just the race riot that went unspoken. It was the thriving Black community in Tulsa that existed until it was basically obliterated in less than 24 hours. We lost this community because of racism, not just from individuals, but in society, where white police officers aided and abetted those seeking to hurt the Black citizens of Tulsa. Let's back up so you can see it, written in the words of Carol Boston Weatherford, who won the Coretta Scott King Author Award for this book, and illustrated by the late Floyd Cooper, who won the Coretta Scott King Illustrator Award for this book. Once upon a time on Black Wall Street, there were dozens of restaurants and grocery stores. There were furriers, a pool hall, a bus system, and an auto shop, nearly 200 businesses in all. Weatherford continues to use the same haunting and classic introduction, even as the story changes from a fairy tale to a nightmare. Once upon a time in Greenwood, up to 300 Black people, including Dr. Jackson, were killed. The subject matter is brutal at times, but the art is thoughtful, continuing to spotlight Black Tulsans through this horrible event. The back matter has more information, context, and some real pictures of the aftermath of the race riots. You can also find an educator guide online, again, developed by Sonia Cherry Paul, with plenty of resources to help support classrooms and groups who want to study this work in a way that is safe for children and affirms their racial identities. Speaking of racial identities, the other talk, Reckoning with Our White Privilege. This book actually starts with a quote by Rennie Edo-Lodge, author of the book, Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race. And Brendan Kiley, the author, heard her loud and clear and takes a stab at the topic of race and racism as a white man with white privilege in this book. And I have to tell you that the way he does it is pitch perfect for tweens. The book starts with 2 stories about visiting a convenience store. One is the author's, where he shoplifts a bottle of strawberry Nesquik and no one notices. The other is the story of Jordan Davis, a Black teen shot and killed in a convenience store parking lot by a white man over an argument about music. Immediately, you know that Kiley is on the level, or whatever slang the kids are using these days. And then he dives in and explores big concepts, continuing to examine what it means to be white. With a small amount of profanity and almost profanity, he includes sections with facts that are pulled out from the text when they're needed. And he addresses his white privilege head on again and again and again, and invites readers to do the same. With chapters like The Entire System is Rigged and What Bullying Looks Like to the Whole Community, Kiley really works to explore, well, the whole system and how he experienced it as a white man. Beyond that, he starts to get into how you can use your own privilege to be an ally. But you can't do that if you can't acknowledge it. And this book is a really great place to start that work.
The Harlem Renaissance remains one of the most celebrated periods of American creativity from the 20th century. Driven by the Great Migration of African Americans from the Jim Crow South to the North, African American art activists found a home and voice in Harlem, New York, and used it to amplify the experience of being Black in America, lobby for change, and redefine what it meant to be Black through the arts. Commonly assigned as Black History projects, children and parents alike descend upon libraries to research artists and writers like Jacob Lawrence, Langston Hughes, and Paul Laurence Dunbar, whose works live on in adaptations across a variety of media, and of course, in history projects. Although some women artists and writers are amongst those researched, many more are not. In fact, many, like Alice Nelson Dunbar, wife of Paul Laurence Dunbar, are often relegated to the footnotes of history and overshadowed by their male counterparts. Thanks to award-winning poet Nikki Giovanni, these women are given their belated flowers. In this title, not only does Nikki honor them with original poems crafted from their verses, but includes biographies and additional sources as well. As a further homage to the Harlem Renaissance, this volume includes beautiful artwork by well-known children's illustrators, including Nina Cruz, Cosby Cabrera, and Vashti Harrison. This title was great for teaching students about poetry, the poetry form of Golden Shovel, in which a new poem is created from a shorter poem. Activism through the arts, and introducing the works of these phenomenal women poets before assigning in an in-depth study. Use this title to inspire budding poets and all interested in using their voices to speak out against inequity.
Dovey Undaunted by Tanya Bolden. Picture it. On a cool October day in 1964, Dovey Mae Johnson Roundtree, a 50-year-old lawyer, is meeting with a defendant accused of murdering a prominent white socialite. At first, she doubts his innocence because the government has a strong case against him. But at the end of their first meeting in a DC jail, Dovey leaves convinced that he was many things, but no murderer. So Dovey is ready to fight like a tiger. If her defense fails, if a judge finds Ray guilty of first-degree murder, he could spend the rest of his life in prison, or he could draw his last breath in a small chamber on the 4th floor of the DC jail, strapped to an electric chair. So opens Dovey Undaunted by Tanya Bolden, a biography of lawyer and civil rights activist Dovey Mae Johnson Roundtree. You may not know much about Dovey, but she was the first lawyer to bring a bus desegregation case before the Interstate Commerce Commission, clinching the ruling that enabled Robert F. Kennedy to enforce bus integration. She was among the first Black women to enter the Women's Army Auxiliary Corps and she was one of the first ordained female ministers in the African Methodist Episcopal Church. Author Tanya Bolden is a master at writing a biography. She's one of my favorites, and her biographies are almost compulsively readable. In this one, she traces Debbie's life from her childhood in Jim Crow, North Carolina, through her adulthood, working to protect the underserved and underprivileged, like the man in the prologue. Dovey is a little-known figure in the American history who believed that the law should serve the people, and her story is an inspiration to us even 50 years later. That's Dovey Undaunted by Tanya Bolden.
The Searing World by Maria Garcia Esperon. A Batch Elder Honor Book, this is a beautiful collection of Indigenous stories from North and South America. Truly one of a kind, each story is a pleasure to read. Organized alphabetically by title, this book's stories span across 2 continents and are peppered with beautiful illustrations. The illustration you see here is paired with Spider Grandmother, which is part of the Hopi tradition. This was one of my favorite stories, and it begins with, Spider Grandmother, dearest old woman, tell me the tale of the stars. How the owl and the eagle fly, why the buffalo graze and dream. Spider Grandmother, here in our adobe home, your voice ensnarls me. Spin me your story, please. I hope this piques your curiosity. You enjoy diving into these stories as much as I did. In addition to stories, this book contains fantastic back matter, including a pronunciation guide, a glossary, a map, and even a quick guide to cultures. When I hear the phrase collection needs, this book is it. It's a necessary addition to any library collection of folktales and mythology. Another title that has, in my opinion, been a long time coming is One Land, Many Nations by Tracy Sorrell and Lee Francis IV. The authors take readers on a tour of their sovereign Native American nations. 2 books in one, this beautiful volume gives in-depth information about the Cherokee Nation, written by Francis, and the Pueblo of Laguna, written by Sorrell. I am sure that many of you have felt the same frustration when students and educators ask for materials on tribes for school assignments. And often, sadly, the material we have to share with them is severely lacking. This is exactly the type of book I have wished for in all of those interactions. Not only does the book provide a history of each nation, but the respective sections dive deeper to include information about tribal governments today, daily life, famous members and citizens, the food, celebrations, and of course, well-crafted bibliographies. In addition to being a fantastic resource, it's just beautiful to read, incredibly engaging, and has a great layout, includes full color photographs. This is volume 1 of the series, and I really can't wait for more volumes to follow.
Have you ever wondered about past plays and pandemics? This book, Plays and Pandemics, written by Kate Mettner, which is the 6th book in the fabulous History Master series, reveals the myth behind many stories told about these outbreaks. Did you know that people were certain that diseases were caused by angry gods or bad smelling air? Today, we know that many diseases are caused by bacteria and viruses. Discover the truth about the Black Death, King Cholera, tuberculosis, also known as TB, COVID-19, and more in this visually appealing book. You will want to be sure to check out the last chapter on information on how to prevent the next pandemic.
Murder on the Baltimore Express, the plot to keep Abraham Lincoln from becoming president by Suzanne Germain. Everyone knows about the assassination of Abraham Lincoln at the hands of John Wilkes Booth, right? But do you know about the plot to assassinate the would-be president before he was even inaugurated? In February 1861, newly elected President Lincoln set out on a 2,000-mile tour of the United States from Springfield, Illinois to Washington, D.C. Luckily, Detective Alan Pinkerton is clued into this plot, and his detective agency steps in with a plan of their own to protect Lincoln. Reading like a spy novel, this book follows how the detectives manage to infiltrate meetings of Lincoln haters and outsmart his would-be assassins. I especially love the appearance of Kate Warren, the first female detective. This book contains fantastic back matter, including an appendix with documented actual dialogue that was used in the text, photographs and art from the time, and you can see here a photograph of the woman who sounded the alarm of the assassination attempt, Dorothea Dix, as well as the location where the assassination was supposed to take place. There's also a timeline, further information about all of the characters mentioned in the book, and of course, an extensive bibliography. Reading this reminded me of Steve Shankin's writing. Look forward to hearing about his latest soon. This suspenseful and exciting book is a must-read for any fan of historical fiction.
Rescuing Titanic, a true story of quiet bravery in the North Atlantic. We all know the story of Titanic, or at least we know a story of Titanic, possibly starring Leo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet. But have you heard of the RMS Carpathia? Me neither, until this book. The Carpathia left New York a day after the Titanic departed the UK. It carried a crew about a third the size of the Titanic, only 300 to the Titanic's 900. It was still a big ocean liner, and the illustrations and text describe how that worked. I love the focus on communication via Morse code, especially because the communication with the Titanic was so important for getting the Carpathia to come save lives. The illustrations in this book really make the urgency of the ship's voyage to the survivors clear, even as the text reminds us how long it would take for the Carpathia to make it to the site of the Titanic's collision. Once they make it, there is some discussion of the tragedy of lives lost, but mostly about lives saved and communicating with loved ones. It includes details of how the passengers and crew decided to turn around and go back to New York and bring the survivors to their destination. I love this view into a popular story from another angle. It really does highlight the quiet bravery on a ship we never hear about. The glossary and sources in the back will help your ship lovers understand boat terminology and give options for further reading about ships and the Titanic.
Meltdown, Earthquake, Tsunami, and Nuclear Disaster in Fukushima by Deirdre Langland. On March 11th, 2011, the largest earthquake ever measured in Japan occurred 80 miles off the northeast coast. That's as far away as Milwaukee is to us here in Chicago. The earthquake then triggered a tsunami with a wall of water 128 feet high. For context, imagine a wall of water the same height as Harold Washington Library Center, which is also 128 feet high. The tsunami's wall of water damaged the nuclear power plant in Fukushima, triggering a nightmare scenario, a nuclear meltdown. For 6 days, employees of the plant worked to contain the meltdown while disaster workers searched for survivors. Meltdown by Deirdre Langland focuses on the science behind what happened, including the science of earthquakes, tsunamis, and nuclear power. These are all complex, technical, kind of boring subjects, but the explanations are straightforward and even pretty exciting. It connects all of these technical subjects to the humans involved in an absorbing, compelling, and intense read. One of the things that kept me turning the pages was how each chapter begins with the status of the 6 reactors. Next slide. That builds tension as we race alongside scientists to keep the worst from happening. In some ways, it felt like every disaster movie you've ever seen, made even more compelling because it really happened. This book also has generous back matter. The timeline is extensive, the glossary is huge, and the bibliography and resources list is large as well. The back matter and straightforward science make it a great book for social studies and science curriculums and for programs about chain reactions and weather, but even reluctant nonfiction readers will have a hard time putting this story of the unprecedented trifecta of disasters explored in Meltdown by Deirdre Langland.
While reading this book, which is one of my new favorites, I was constantly reminded of this quote: "When the going gets tough, the tough gets going." Race Against Time tells the untold story of Scipio Jones and his battle to save 12 innocent men. This story was discovered by the authors, Sandra Neal Wallace and Rich Wallace, when they were doing research on another project. They were surprised to find out no one had written a book for youth readers about Scipio Jones or the Elaine 12 men who were sharecroppers just trying to get a fair price for their crops. Told in chronological order, this well-researched and compelling story, told in under 150 pages, will keep you on the edge of your seat. This civil rights story starts on September 1919, but justice doesn't prevail till 5 years later in 1924. Because of Scipio, Moore versus Dempsey was the first U.S. Supreme Court ruling in favor of Black defendants in a criminal case that upheld the integrity of the 14th Amendment. Next slide. Packed with historical photos along with concise fact matter, including a bibliography and website. This book is excellent for learning more of the past untold stories of African-American history makers long before Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Rosa Parks.
Fallout, Spies, Super Bombs, and the Ultimate Cold War Showdown by Steve Sheinkin. The history books cover the broad details of the Cold War, but successful narrative nonfiction authors like Steve Sheinkin know small details and seemingly ordinary people play pivotal roles, shoving events in one direction or the other. I love the way he introduces these very important, sometimes ordinary people at the beginning of each section. Here we can see folks we know, JFK and Khrushchev, alongside spies and secret escape tunnelers and astronauts who all play pivotal roles in the story. And somehow Sheinkin weaves it all together. It starts with a hollow nickel, easily introducing the ideas of spies and spy technology. Each chapter introduces something new, just a little something to draw you in. One chapter, it's a hydrogen bomb test. Another shares the songs and scenes from the movies kids were shown in the Cold War to teach them how to duck and cover. And of course, there are lots of stories about spies hiding in plain sight. Spies are the heart of the first section. Kennedy and Khrushchev start to take center stage in part 2. Plus we learn how the Russians went to space. And we learn about East and West Germany split by a wall. The story of Harry Seidel is particularly compelling as he rescued many from East Germany through tunnels. By the end of the book, you'll have seen what it takes to turn a spy to double agent, experienced a rocket launch, and of course, hung out with Kennedy and Khrushchev as they try not to end the world as we know it. It's a lot, but it's compelling. Recommend this to your history and mystery lovers and your kids in need of thrills and political chills.
Sydney Taylor middle grade honor book, Genius Under the Stairs, is a hilarious, bittersweet, and engaging illustrated graphic memoir. The author, Eugene Yelchin, shares stories from his life as a Jewish kid growing up in Russia during the Cold War. This book is a fantastic, accessible middle grade account of what his world was like during such a confusing and troubling time. Young Yevgeny lives with his family in a tiny room inside a communal apartment. Due to a lack of space and a need for privacy, he sleeps under the family's dining room table, where he spends his evenings drawing on the underside of that table. This book is hilarious, charming, but at times utterly heartbreaking. The anti-Semitism his family faces is awful and can be really tough to read. He also matter-of-factly describes how his neighbors spied on each other and reported back to the KGB as if it were completely normal. This book is largely the recognizable story of discovering oneself. Yevgeny spends most of the book searching for his talent, but spoiler alert, it's all over the pages in the form of the line drawings he recreated from drawings under this table. His quest for his talent leads to loads of hilarious circumstances. And there's also a particularly funny anecdote of his brother chewing a stick of juicy fruit gum for weeks that had me laughing out loud. This book is a beautiful depiction of life behind the Iron Curtain, and during these unsettling times, I found it comforting and fun to read such a delightful and interesting story. I also think this would be a helpful tool for kids who are witnessing and trying to make sense of their parents' responses to living during unprecedented times.
I know that last title was one of Sarah's favorites of the year, and this title is one of my favorites of the year, Orangutan Hats by Richard Haynes with illustrations by Stephanie Labris. Would you believe me if I told you that in the wild, elephants use sunscreen, orangutans use pillows, and crows go sledding for fun? It's all true, and you can learn about it in Orangutan Hats by Richard Haynes, with dynamic illustrations by Stephanie Labris that explores all of the different kinds of tools that animals have developed in the wild. Tools can help us with everything from homework to hygiene. A toothbrush is a tool, so is a shovel, so is a pencil. For thousands of years, it was believed that only humans were intelligent enough to invent and use tools. But since 1960, Biologists, zoologists, and other animal behavior specialists have discovered that animals have ways to use and adapt common objects in their quest for survival. The book is broken down into different categories, such as tools for staying neat and clean, tools for defense, tools for comfort and joy, and more. After a full color world map showing where the featured animals live across the globe, 2-page spreads explore different animals and the tools they use in each category. I especially loved learning that orangutans have the longest child of any animal excluding humans. In Borneo and Sumatra, young female orangutans mimic their mothers taking care of younger siblings by taking small bundles of leaves to bed with them. They hold and cuddle these bundles through the night as a human child might do with a doll. Young chimpanzees do something similar with bundles of sticks. This title works well for a huge variety of ages thanks to the playful illustrations and is great for casual browsing or to inspire finding out more information about specific animals. It also offers a lot of fun programmatic and curriculum tie-in ideas. Try inventing a new tool or using a tool an animal uses to see if you can get the same results. Next time I get caught in the rain, I might try making a hat out of a leaf just like an orangutan. That's Orangutan Hats by Richard Haynes with illustrations by Stephanie Labaris.
Think kids are too small or young to speak out, protest, or fight for justice? If you do, you might be surprised to learn that kids have been doing this as early as 1903 with the March of the Male Children, which included 16,000 child strikers from poor families who worked in textile factories. Kids on the March by Michael G. Long include 15 stories of kids who have proven they can be activists for causes they believe in. The introduction highlights a timeline of the 15 iconic movements. The book is divided into 2 parts with protests from the 20th century and the 21st century. Some of these may be familiar to you as the March on Washington with Martin Luther King Jr. in 1963, and some not so familiar, such as the student walkouts of East Los Angeles in 1968. You may be more familiar with different protests that have occurred in the 21st century, such as the Women's March in 2017 and the George Floyd protest in 2020. The cool thing about this book is you don't have to read it in any particular order. I actually started with the 1968 East LA student walkout since I grew up there and had never heard of them. Readers will appreciate the tips for marching for organizers and participants, also included at the end of this book.